in last lecture we have seen the introduction part of impression materials, then the definition of impression, what do you mean by impression materials, what do you mean by cast, what do you mean by dye, the classification of impression materials, and the additive format. Today we are going to see the rigid type of impression materials. As I told you that impression materials are classified into two types. One is non-elastic, also known as rigid, and one is elastic. Okay, that is known as non-rigid. Non-elastic means after these are the materials which after setting are stiff, means they don't have any elastic property. But elastic materials are those which after setting also they have some elastic properties. Okay, so today we are going to see the impression compound, zinc oxide diffusion on impression paste, impression plaster, and waxes. You all at least have seen the impression compound. So it is a rigid thermoplastic reversible type of impression material, also known as modeling compound. Okay, rigid means we are seeing the classification. It comes under the rigid, means after setting this material is stiff. Thermoplastic means it has a plastic. It is a plastic in nature and it changes property by changing temperature. That's why known as thermoplastic. Reversible. Reversible means it. If we place this impression compound into the hot water, it softens, and same compound if we place into the cold water, it sets. So that's why it is known as reversible. Okay. So uses used for preliminary impression for indigenous arches. During your first year, I shown various demonstration of complete denture. So the first step of complete denture fabrication is the making of your preliminary impression. Okay. So in that we use this impression material as impression compound. Okay. Second is your border molding. Border molding, like it is a second step of your denture fabrication. Okay. Then single tooth impression and fabrication of special tray. So it is mode of supply. It get us in this cake form. This is known as cake form. This is known as stick form. The same impression bond I can get in the case of cake form or stick form. If I have to use this impression compound for an impression, then I will use this cake form. If I want to use impression compound for photo molding, then I will use this stick form. Okay. Now these ingredients you can go through the textbook. They are given in the textbook. Basic composition and its function. Okay. Next is the classification. Now we have seen the classification of all the impression materials, but impression compound is also classified into two types. That is type 1 and type 2. Okay, this is type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is known as impression compound, and type 2 is known as tray compound. The impression material we use for making an impression is known as type 1. Same impression compound if I'm going to use for application of tray, okay, special tray, then it is known as type 2 compound. Okay, now the composition wise they both are same. The only composition difference is the filler content, means it is more viscous. Type 2 is more viscous or it is more rigid than type 1. That's why it is used for type 2 is used for fabrication of tray, and type 1 for impression making. Now these are the flow. How much is the flow at 37 degrees centigrade and 45 degrees centigrade? Like for any impression making or any procedure in oral cavity, we use near about 45 degrees centigrade temperature. Okay, so at that temperature, the more the flow of the material is, the more accurate it will be, as we seen in the requirement part of your impression materials. Okay, more the flow is there, more accurate the impression is there. Okay, now see here At 45 degrees centigrade, its flow is 85, but at 37, its flow is 6%. Now that's why it is used for impression making. And type 2, at 37 degrees its flow is only 2%, so it is more rigid. So that's why it is used for fabrication of a tray. Now manipulation of impression compound. As I told you, we have two types. We get one is your cake form and the other is your stick form. Okay, so this is I showed in previous demonstration the stick form also and the cake form also. Now there are two ways of manipulation of impression compound. One is by water bath and other is by direct heat. For impression making, what we do, we break the impression compound in small pieces and we put this on a hot water. Okay, so impression compound or this is used for impression making. Now I have to do the second step of dental fabrication, that is the bottom molding. For bottom molding, I will use the stick and direct heat I am going to apply. Okay, now this will melt and I will put this on a tray and I will make the impression. Okay, so there are two ways of softening of impression compound. One is by direct heat, directly placing the impression compound in a hot water bath, or by applying the direct heat to it. So there are now these are the steps, various steps how to manipulate the impression compound in patient's mouth. Okay, now we take an impression compound. Now I am showing this part for the impression making, not the bottom molding part. So what we do, this step is very necessary even in your practical exam for second years. There are two materials we keep for practical. That is, one is impression compound and other is zeroil. So these two are your part of your manipulation part in your dental material practicals. Okay. So what questions sir asked to you? I will explain all this to you. Just listen carefully. Okay. Now we take an impression compound. Now, this is your whole impression compound. Okay. Now we take a hot water. Now the temperature of that water will be 60 to 65 degrees centigrade. Please listen carefully. This temperature is very important because these are the questions which are asking you in exams. Okay, we won't take boiling water. Okay, we take water which has a temperature of about 60 to 65 degrees centigrade. Okay, now before putting that impression compound into the water, we break that compound into small pieces. Okay, now and what we do, we scratch on the surface of your impression compound. So what happens by scratching, we due to scratching we increase this impression compound is a bad conductor of heat. So if I put this impression compound into the water, only the outer surface will get melt or it gets softened, but the inner surface will get hard, so heat will not penetrate into it. That's why to increase the surface area that the water will touch to the side of your compound, what we do, we break impression compound into 4 to 5 pieces. Due to this, what happens, the contact of water to the impression compound will increase. Okay, the material remains the same, but the area that contact to the impression compound, the water which contact to the impression, hot water which contact to the impression compound will increase. That allows your uniform softening of your impression compound. Okay, we can't make impression that outer surface is soft and inner surface is cold, and we can't manipulate the impression compound. Okay, now the temperature, it should be 60 to 65 degrees centigrade. Okay, now we put the impression compound. We won't use boiling water. So if I, what happens if I use the boiling water and if I put the impression compound in it, all the composition, uh, like the, as we see in the composition, like beeswax resins will leach out from the impression compound and it will lose its property. Okay, if I put impression compound in a boiling water, all the ingredients in the impression compound will leach out into the hot water and you lose the softening property of your impression compound. That's why only 60 to 65 degrees centigrade temperature of water we use. Okay? Then uh, once so the process uh, of mixing the impression compound is known as kneading. This kneading, KNEADING. Okay, the process is known as kneading. Please remember this word because it will come to you as a MCQ also, and sir will ask in Viva also, okay, what do you mean by kneading? So kneading is what? Like, suppose I have put my impression point into water, it gets softens. Now to even though we cut this impression component into small pieces, the heat will not go inside. So what we do? We do kneading. Means what? The outer surface will come, go inside, and inner surface will come out. Like you all are now at home. You have seen your mother, like before making a chapati. What he do? He make a flour. What do you call this as a kanik? How he manipulate by the process of kneading only. So what he do? She take the flour, add some water into it, then outer surface will go inside into the water, inner surface will go away. The same way we do the kneading. Like if the compound is softened, the outer surface will go inside and inner surface will come outside. That is, that is the way we knead the impression compound. Now, during this procedure, we dip this impression compound into the water continuous to uniformly transfer the heat all over the compound. Okay, then we for mandible I'm showing you, we make a roll of impression compound and we place that impression compound in our selected tray. Okay, this is there. Okay, first step is we soften the impression compound. Second step is we knead or manipulate the impression compound. Now if the compound is uniformly softened, then what I put this impression compound into the on a tray. Okay, then with the help of fingertips I will manipulate based on the how my ridge is there. Okay, so I will give this nice shape to my impression compound. Okay, which helps to make an impression of patient. Now during this procedure some amount of heat is lost, so I resoften this impression compound by putting into the hot water and I place this tray into the patient's mouth. Okay. Now, see, I have placed this tray into the patient's mouth. I have done some movements, tongue movements, and this is how I get the impression. This impression is known as preliminary impression. This is the first step of your denture fabrication. Okay. Now, बहुत दिन हो गए तुमको यहाँ पे आके सब भूल गए हो गए डेंचर स्टेप्स फैब्रिकेशन के, इवन दो थोड़ा तो याद रहेगा तो. So I have shown you the red impression material. Okay, that is the impression compound. Now again with the SCQ, these two definition you always have to know. This will ask you for Viva. This will also ask you for the SCQ part. Okay. If impression compound is asked, you have to write these two. This is the very much important concept you need to understand. Okay. First is glass transition temperature. The second is fusion temperature. Okay. Glass transition temperature means what? The temperature at which material loses its hardness or brittleness on heating and from heated mass upon cooling is referred as glass transition temperature. This 39 degrees centigrade, you have to remember this will also you will ask you for MCQ. What is the glass transition temperature of impression compound? Okay, it is 39 degrees centigrade. Now this means what? Suppose now as I said during your manipulation part, we use the temperature of water. It should be how much? It should be 60 to 65 degrees centigrade. Okay. Now impression compound is rigid. So what happens? I break it into small pieces. I put that impression compound into the water. Okay. Okay. Then the temperature of your impression compound gets started to rise. Suppose during rigid it is about, suppose it is 25 degrees centigrade. Now if I put this component to hot water, the temperature started to rise. So what happens at 39 degrees centigrade? The means the glass temperature means what? The temperature at which the material loses its hardness. Means at this temperature the material starts to lose its hardness or brittleness. On heating, I put that component into the hot water. So on heating, if the material loses its hardness and form and or now suppose I'm now cooling it. I place that tray in patient's mouth at temperature of suppose 45 degrees centigrade. Now what at what temperature is about 37 degrees centigrade. Okay. So from 45 degrees centigrade the temperature starts to falls down. So at 39 degrees centigrade also what happens? The material forms to rigid mass. So the, now listen, the temperature at which the material loses its hardness on heating and forms a rigid mass on cooling is referred as glass transition temperature. Means what? At this temperature the material starts losing its hardness and also the material starts to form a rigid mass. Is known as glass transition temperature. Okay, don't read this definition from Monopoly, they are given wrong. Okay, so so actually you take a screenshot or take a photo of this because this definition is not given anywhere, or you can write it down during, because during exam I'm going to ask you this question during the first internal. I'm telling you. Okay. So the temperature at which the material loses its hardness on heating. This is very important, on heating, and also forms a rigid mass on cooling is known as glass transition temperature. I think you everyone have understood this. Okay. Now fusion temperature. So fusion temperature of impression compound, it is a heating of approximately 43.5 degrees centigrade. Glass transition temperature is 39 degrees centigrade, whereas fusion temperature is 43.5 degrees centigrade. Okay. So at what happens at this temperature, the material softens to plastic mass that can be manipulated, and it is called as fusion temperature. Uh, Suppose now same thing, we have taken water bath of 60 to 65 degrees centigrade. I put solid impression compound into the water. So so from 25 degrees centigrade it comes to 39 degrees centigrade. So it, at 39 degrees centigrade, what happens? It started to soften. Okay, means it just starts to soften at that temperature, but it is not that soft that we can manipulate it. Okay, see the difference between the glass transition temperature and the fusion temperature. At glass transition temperature is what? The material just starts to soften, but at fusion temperature the material is very soft so that we can make the impression. Okay, the fusion temperature is 43.5 degrees centigrade. Okay, so we during impression making, so this during suppose see this temperature what I manipulate is suppose this is glass transition temperature, but when I place this tray in patient's mouth, this temperature should be above fusion temperature. Whenever we manipulate the impression temperature, when we place in patient's mouth, the temperature should be above 43.5 degrees centigrade or near about 45 degrees centigrade. At this temperature only we can manipulate or we can soften the impression compound. Okay, so If the material, if the temperature of this is less, the material will be rigid or it will become solid. We can't manipulate it according to our wish. Only when it is above fusion temperature, then only we can manipulate it. So when then we place the tray in patient's mouth above fusion temperature, and we remove the tray from patient's mouth after glass transition temperature. Okay, don't get confused. What we do, we place tray in patient's mouth above fusion temperature. Okay, why? Because at this temperature the material is soft. Okay, we place that tray in patient mouth, so that after placing in patient mouth the temperature starts to decrease. We remove, at what happens at glass transition temperature, the material starts to get solidified. Okay, so we remove this after setting only. We have to remove this tray from patient's mouth. Okay, so we remove the tray from patient mouth below glass transition temperature, and we place the tray in patient mouth above fusion temperature. Okay, one last time I am going to explain the temperature at which the material loses its hardness on heating and forms a rigid mass on cooling is referred as glass transition temperature. And fusion temperature is, it is about 43.5 degrees centigrade. At this temperature, the material soften to form a plastic mass and which can be manipulated. Okay. Now thermal conductivity, as I explained you, it is a very has a very low thermal conductivity. That's why we have to break this impression from into small pieces before placing it into the hot water bath. Okay, thermal contraction. Now again the uses of impression compound. It can be used. It is used for the preliminary impression for individual arches. Okay, preliminary impression. Please remember this, not a final impression. Preliminary impression is the first step of your denture fabrication. Okay. Used to modify or fit the stock trays. Suppose this is the metal tray, but everyone has a, if this tray is short for my patient, so I can use this impression compound to modify this tray. Okay. Then as a base for wash impression technique, to obtain peripherals like this for border molding. Okay. Last operative is for copper technique. Okay. Now second impression material is zinc oxide divisional impression paste. So it is also a rigid type of impression material. It comes under the rigid type, rigid part of your impression material. Okay, impression material two types: rigid, non-rigid, or elastic, non-elastic. Non-elastic we have impression compound, impression plaster, zinc oxide divisional impression paste, and waxes. Okay, so it is a rigid, irreversible type of impression material. Okay, irreversible means it doesn't come to its original form. When these two pastes are mixed, it forms a chemical reaction and we get a final product. Okay, that's why it is a irreversible type of impression material. Okay, now what are the uses of this in ZOE impression paste? It is used for surgical dressing. Okay, then your temporary filling material, your root canal filling material, your bite registration paste, and for impression of individual's mouth. This is very important for us. Impression for material for individual's mouth means for final impression. Now the impression compound we are studying last previously, it is the impression material used for preliminary impression. Okay, ZOE is used for final impression. Okay, the second step of your denture fabrication is the border molding and final making a final impression. Border molding we do with the impression compound again, but the impression part is this is the impression of ZOE. Okay. Uh, my ZOE will be do we'll see in next lecture because it will be long and it will come as a LQ for you, like define impression, classify impression materials, and write in detail about zinc oxide regional impression paste. These are the type of question they ask. Okay. Here, stop. Hello, play.